settles on every living person it touches like a fog.
It Welcome to Derry just wrapped up its first season, and in case you missed any of my little short videos reviewing each episode, I really loved this series, maybe even more so than the two Andy Muschietti movies. A major component to the show, based off of a cheeky reference in the Stephen King novel, is Mr. Dick Hallorann. This is the fourth iteration of the character on screen, and youngest too, being played excellently by Chris Chalk. Spoilers for season 1 moving forward, but Dick Hallorann ends the series by saying that he's going off to a hotel in London. Although some fans may be thinking he's going to the Overlook Hotel, which is where he's going sometime soon, of course, I think he has a few side quests under his belt to do first. And notably, the Overlook Hotel is located in Colorado, not London. So why is Dick specifically going across the pond? What doesn't work about that theory, though, is that season 2 plans on going 27 years into the past before the events of It Welcome to Derry season 1. So how could we follow Dick Hallorann into the future at the same time? Well, I have a theory that It Welcome to Derry is going to reinvent the Stephen King universe as we know it, and also the characters of Dick Hallorann and Pennywise the Dancing Clown. So let's talk a little bit about why I think the Stephen King universe is about to expand in this series moving into season 2. Hey everybody, I'm Killjoy Jake, and instead of having friends, I have horror movies. If you like updates on upcoming horror movies and TV, then make sure to like this video and subscribe for more uploads just like this. Also, the best way to support the page is by becoming a Patreon supporter or channel member, where you'll gain access to exclusive review videos. Patreon supporters even get to see new trailer reactions. Thank you to everyone who keeps me in business. Now let's get into this theory. Now, before we talk about what is likely going to be one of the most insane theories I have ever pitched on this channel ever, let's do the legwork and talk about some actual updates regarding season 2 of It Welcome to Derry. Clearly, actor Chris Chalk wants to continue playing this character in future seasons. He's even hinting at a return in Men's Health recently, saying, "This is just the beginning. This is only a glimpse of who he will become, of him realizing this is who I could be. I can be generous with my powers, but there's still a long journey to get there." At this moment, he's not even learning to use his powers for good yet. He's just learning to use them at all. Why not? Let's make it happen. I haven't really talked to anybody about anything officially, but it makes so much sense. I do think there is an incredibly rich world to explore between now to once he gets to the Overlook. Welcome to Derry co-creator and showrunner Jason Fuchs talked recently about the inclusion of this character too, with Deadline saying, "As a Stephen King fan, it's hard when you're working on these things to not let your mind wander to other Stephen King books you cared about. And think about how these stories might interact. Even you think about the end of Dick Hallorann's journey in this show, yes, he does say he's going off to work at the kitchen of a hotel, but he's not going to Colorado, he's going to London. It suggests there's a lot of story that unravels between the end of this journey and the beginning of The Shining at the Overlook Hotel. So clearly there's a want from not only the actor, but also one of the series co-creators here to do more with this character in the future. So are they just writing him off to a very random place, London, just for no reason? I don't think so. That to me is just way too specific of a detail to rope themselves to. In fact, I think it has to be a clue as to where we're going in season 2, not just going back into the past to the 1930s, but also in the future to London with Dick Hallorann. This gets even more interesting because there is a short story with Stephen King that takes place in London that would kind of work really well with some things set up in season 1 of It Welcome to Derry. Crouch End, featured in Stephen King's short story collection Nightmares and Dreamscapes, is a Lovecraftian-inspired story about an American woman named Doris living in London who tells police constables about the strange disappearance of her husband. She says that while looking for a friend's house in the neighborhood of Crouch End, the couple seemingly drove into another dimension that mirrors the real world. They are stalked by deformed children who eventually summon a Lovecraftian goddess. This consumes her husband Lonnie as she is somehow transported back into the real world. One of the officers ends up disappearing in a similar way and is never heard of again. When the case runs cold, Doris returns home to America where she experiences mental health problems. Things that I can't say in a YouTube video, maybe you know where I'm going with that. Finally, she accepts what happened with her husband and decides to continue living on to care for her own children. So another possibly unrelated fun fact about this story is that none other than Tim Curry reads the audiobook for this, which of course he is the first on-screen Pennywise in the It miniseries from the 90s. Diving into how I think this story could connect to It Welcome to Derry, we know that monsters oftentimes represent represent real-life terror. For instance, Pennywise the dancing clown very much so represents fear very literally in the show and the movies. In fact, to overcome Pennywise the dancing clown, you basically have to bully him to death, which is what we saw at the end of It Chapter 2. This whole thing, I believe, is just one big metaphor for overcoming fear and believing in oneself. Our Lovecraftian goddess in Crouch End is very similar to a succubus, and I think this whole story can be summed up as a metaphor for an affair. Before he disappears, Doris's husband ends up being really unstable and crappy to her, and then gets consumed by this goddess. It's a very similar story to an affair that leads to a divorce and then being separated. This is getting long-winded, but the point is there's some similarities between this goddess and Pennywise the dancing clown. They're both monsters with metaphors. Welcome to Derry is not only full of references to other Stephen King properties, but it's also honing in on Pennywise the dancing clown, going into his backstory in this past season. If you think about it too, we've already learned everything there is to know about Pennywise concerning what happens in the actual films themselves. A lot of loose ends have already been taken care of. We now know why it took the form of the real Pennywise the dancing clown, because he entertained the children, and also it delved deeper into this parasitic relationship that he has with Ingrid. So what else are the other 2 seasons of It Welcome to Derry going to do, outside of recounting events that were listed in the book? What was so great about season 1 is that they were able to add in other elements to the story and build upon those things. My thoughts here is that when Dick Hallorann goes over to London, maybe he's not only dealing with the ghosts of this hotel, but also runs into Doris, who lost her husband recently in Crouch End. Here, Hallorann might discover this fissure between our world and that of an alien dimension, like how it's described in the short. Maybe instead of encountering a Lovecraftian succubus, however, he encounters more creatures just like Pennywise. It Chapter 2 already established that he's some sort of alien. Why don't we see what his home planet looks like? The reason that this could work with It Welcome to Derry Season 2 especially is because we just learned something new about Pennywise the dancing clown. He doesn't experience time in the same way that we do. We learned based on his conversation with Marge that he already knows that the Losers Club is going to eventually kill him. We also heard Marge kind of relay this to Lily, and that conversation got really interesting. They talked a little bit about how, well, maybe at some other point in time, that could be someone else's fight. That kind of lends itself to the idea that if somebody back in like the 1930s or 1908 in season 3, if they fuck up, that means that Pennywise could essentially live beyond the events of It Chapter 2 if one of the Losers Club members, for instance, never existed. That gives this series some serious stakes outside of just recounting events that we sort of already know about. So let's say Dick Hallorann does interact with Pennywise's dimension or planet, whatever. Maybe he does something to interfere with space-time, allowing Pennywise and maybe some other members of his species to get the upper hand in one of the upcoming prequel stories. So maybe there's not just one Pennywise in Derry, but there's also something going on in London now. This could come off as a bit of a rug pull for some people, but I think it makes this story just something different. Because one of the big things we can't do in this show is kill Pennywise again. We can't have a big triumphant ending like that. But can Dick Hallorann find a way to stop another one of these creatures in London and have that big triumphant moment that we're kind of looking for from this series? Maybe he has the help of some of the ghosts at this new hotel too, because of course it's haunted. Every hotel in a Stephen King story is haunted. Come on. All right, so let's take a breath. Let's take a moment to kind of chillax after that very insane theory about other dimensions, other planets, and even ghosts. I don't know if anything even remotely similar to this is what they're planning for season 2, but I think I have some pretty strong evidence, and I am also questioning where the series is heading next and how they can top what came before it. I think anytime you're approaching a sequel, creatives are always asking themselves that question. Like I was saying earlier, we already know what happens to a lot of these characters now based on season 1. I feel like with each season, the twists and turns are going to be less shocking and more predictable based on stories that the creators are locked into. I'm worried that might get boring at a certain point, and I think this whole introduction about one of Pennywise's new powers is a way to subvert that. It may not be this insane theory here, but I think 100% for sure, something I'm very confident in, is the reason that they're implementing that new power for Pennywise moving forward into the next couple of seasons is to give this show some stakes. To say that, hey, this all isn't over yet. Pennywise knows what happens in It Chapter 2 just like us. That means there's still room for him to be able to escape the town of Derry in the future, or some sort of new timeline. If the creatives here decide to take a massive swing and get into some Dark Tower bullshit, which, you know, is a very famous Stephen King novel series, which is all about the multiverse and string theory, all that bullshit, which mind you even does feature more creatures just like Pennywise that feed off of an emotion, I think that this series could be maybe the most grandiose, most insane Stephen King series of all time. As a fan of the Dark Tower series, I am all about this insane Dick Hallorann theory about ghosts, space-time, other dimensions, other planets and aliens and shit, because that's just, it's so Stephen King, baby. How are you guys feeling about this convoluted theory and also moving into season 2 of It Welcome to Derry? Let me know down in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching. Please subscribe, and as always, don't forget to kill it out there, y'all.